questions just off.
I don't like it.
Heard your story, I have to say, it really touched me in a very profound way. I mean, there are a lot of people here in America, here in New York, who made a lot of money, lost a lot of money, struggled, suffered, bounced back. I mean, that's nothing new. However, there are not a lot of people who experienced what you experienced that day on your balcony. GJ, tell us your story.
Well, it's pretty simple. I had a great childhood. I had to leave it to beaver childhood. Everything was great. Went to school, got good grades, went in the military, did great, got a corporate job, did great, became an entrepreneur, did great, and all of a sudden, one day, it was gone. And so, over a period of time, different situations happened, and bit by bit, I just kept going down and down and down. And long story short, I had depression. Didn't realize I was in depression until I was out of depression. And one day I walked out on my back deck, and I was ready just to end it all and commit suicide. And I was a broken man. I was broken mentally, I was broken physically, and I was broken emotionally. And so I struggled that day, and all of a sudden, my whole life changed right before me.
Wow, that's a lot. So basically the big picture is you had it all. Big money, big house, luxury cars, the beautiful girlfriend. You were the man. And then one day, through certain circumstances, you lost everything, which led you to God that day on your balcony.
Most definitely. And next thing you know, the bills got to be paid, and over a period of time it just went, down, down, down. Couldn't get anything going, like I said. And so one day I was just so fed up, and I just felt so much like a failure, and just emotionally drained, emotionally broken, physically broken, mentally broken, and I was just compelled to just end my life. And so one day, a beautiful June day in Kansas, and just imagine just the most beautiful, surroundings. I walk out on my back deck, and I'm ready just to end it all right on that day. Very profound. And so it was a vision as if I was living it at that moment. And it was God said, I will show you how. And I realized then it was God grabbing a hold of me and saying, I'm going to show you how to live a life. You just need to follow. And it was a major wake-up call. And so from that point on, he showed me that I would be telling my story. Well, I'm like, what story? And at that moment, I had no story. And who would want to know this story? Because I'm afraid to tell anybody about this story.
Because you felt like a loser.
I felt like, total failure.
But little did you know where you were going to be next.
Exactly.
But God knew.
Right. And so he showed me that I was actually speaking to groups of thousands of people. And one of them happened to be 13,549 people. Now, why would I remember that number? I still don't know the meaning of that number. I just know why it went not 13,000 or 1,000 or, whatever. And so I knew there was more defining to that number. And then I'd be speaking and telling my story around the world. And I'm still like, what story?
Yeah.
And so finally I let it subside. And then I didn't say one word about this whole set of events for 1 year.
Wow. Why?
I was embarrassed.
Right, it was heavy.
It was heavy.
You thought people wouldn't believe.
I felt people wouldn't believe it. I also felt that it was so out of character for me. And most people would always look at to me when there were times of, heartache or trouble, I was like the rock.
Right, they looked up to you.
Yes.
Right.
And so for me to tell that story, now they'd be looking down on me.
Right.
And now I realize a lot of people that are high achievers and they come into a tough time, that may happen. So they're afraid to tell their story.
Right.
And now I tell everyone I come in contact, if you have a story, tell it.
Right.
You can help somebody.
Right.
So a year later, one of my best friends was going through depression, and he knew he was having depression. When I was in depression, I didn't know I was in depression. And there's over 17 million people suffering from depression right now. Those are documented cases. What about the people that were like myself that aren't documented, that no one knew about? So there's more than 17 million people. Suicide is on the rise. And now with the economic challenge that we have, that's on the rise.
Yeah.
One person every 40 seconds is taking a life because of situations that have happened, some of them like mine.
Right.
So I didn't know that at the time. And so one of my best friends was in depression. He knew he was in depression. He had high blood pressure, and then when his blood pressure went up, his depression level went up. And so one night he calls me, he says, gee, I don't think I'm gonna make it. I said, dude, you're gonna make it. And he was happened to stand at a friend of ours in Kansas City, and So I called my friend and said, hey, what's going on? And he told me, and then next thing I know, he says, I'm gonna check on him on the hour. I said, well, I'm calling every hour. So before I hung up, I said, let me talk to Mike. So I told Mike, I said, Mike, remember when I was going through my tough time? He said, yeah. I said, you just weren't, right, but, you're G. And I said, here's what happened. So I told him the story. And I said, we're gonna get through this together. And then every hour I'd call his number, and he happened to answer every time. So the next time I said, you're calling me. So he ends up calling me. So all through the night we did that. And finally the next day he said, gee, you gotta tell your story. I said, well, I saw that in my vision, but I said, I don't know what really to tell.
In what capacity? You
Exactly.
don't even know where to begin.
Right, who am I to tell it to?
Right.
He said, well, you started with me. And so, long story short, here I am in New York City. On Easter weekend, 3 years ago, I was here speaking to a whole room of entrepreneurs. I was in a nice suit, I looked like $1 million, and the reason I say it, because somebody told me that. And here I am, I'm out of town, I'm not a New Yorker, I'm from the Midwest, and so it was like, no one believed me, nobody trusts you. You can just tell when no one trusts you.
Right.
You gotta get that trust factor if you're gonna have an impact when you're speaking.
Right.
And so, I ended up, did my part and handed over, and I was supposed to finish out the training. And so I go, I take a break, and all of a sudden my friend calls me, my friend Mike, and he says, gee, how's it going? I says, told him it's not going well. He said, there's somebody in that room that needs you to hear your story.
Wow.
I said, why would I tell my story now? He said, dude, you need to tell your story.
And he sensed that.
He sensed it. And since then, God grabbed a hold of him and truly transformed his life. And so he's talking to me, and so I go in there and I says, you know what, let me just tell you why I'm here on an Easter weekend, when I can be anywhere in the world, I'm away from my family, and why are y'all out here hearing me? Can we just get to the, get to the bottom of this and get real? And they all said yes, and finally I just said, here's why I'm here, here's my story. And all of a sudden, a guy stands up and says, dude, I'm with you. I'm right there right now. He says, I'm at that point. And right now, I know there's a better way, and I believe you. From that point on, the rest of the room it was amazing. And I saw the energy level, I saw the trust. And I knew then that this was a story that needed to be told.
Right.
And so, long story short, I've told that story, maybe a few hundred times since then. And then everybody kept telling me I need to write a book. Well, I'm the last guy that would ever want to write. I was the guy in school that when you had to write it, a writing assignment, can you write this for me?
Right, you're the numbers man.
Right.
Obviously, you're a businessman.
Right, give me numbers, I'm great. But give me something I can write out.
Right.
Can you do my homework for me?
Right.
And now I've started writing, and I'm actually in the process of completing 3 books. One's done. And so now I like to write, and now I'm telling my story through other ways and through other mediums. And of course now with the internet and video, I'm working on a project like that.
Sure.
And now I want to tell my story. So now when I speak to entrepreneurial groups, which I speak to all across the country and the Caribbean, sometimes I'll touch upon my story. And out of all the things that I touch upon, I can tell that my story has more impact. So now I really see that vision.
That is your calling.
That's
you're
my calling.
fulfilling it, and you're on the path. You might not know exactly how it ends, but you're on the path.
Exactly.
So, okay, let's back up for a minute. So, for all the cynics out there, can you just tell me, the day on your balcony when you heard this voice, was it an audible voice, like I'm speaking to you right now, or was it like a voice from within?
It was, that's a great question, and it was really a combination. I truly felt a physical presence grabbing hold of me, lovingly, and I heard the voice so loud and clear. And it was almost a loud, stern voice. So I heard it audibly, and I heard it internally.
So it was stern, but it wasn't a judging voice. You said it was a loving voice.
Very loving. It was like, I love you, and you
Without saying it, that's what the voice was telling you. That's
Exactly.
what you felt.
Exactly.
So was there any doubt in your mind, that moment, whose voice it was? You never thought, Dad, is that you? I mean, you weren't thinking, is there someone that just walked into the apartment? You knew it was the voice of God?
At that very moment, I didn't know clearly. I knew when I had the vision the next night, that made all sense. But I felt that presence. I felt that it's hard to describe unless it's happened to you, where there was a presence, a loving spiritual connection that I definitely felt. So I knew that immediately. Yet I'm thinking, you know, am I hearing things because of the
Right.
state of mind? I knew I
You
wasn't.
knew this wasn't a human voice.
Most definitely.
Okay, you knew that. Wow, so it's really interesting to me that, I mean, you were an overachiever. You were the best at everything. I mean, you rose from, you were a sergeant in the U.S. Army from an early age. You were, you know, on the fast track up the corporate ladder. You were an entrepreneurial genius and superstar. I mean, you, everything you touched turned to gold, basically. That's why they call you G-Money. You have the Midas touch. So for you to be at a point where nothing was going right and you were left with nothing, I mean, you say you couldn't figure out why that happened, but did it ever dawn on you that maybe that was meant to happen?
Most definitely not. Now, at the moment, I had no clue. And then hearing why I needed to tell a story.